My name is Victor Hale, and I never thought a simple family dinner could turn into a public attempt to strip me of my dignity. That night, my own son-in-law looked me in the eye, smirked, and asked, "How does it feel to be irrelevant?" Little did he know I'd been quietly preparing for this moment, and I was ready to turn the table on him. The Auberge du Lit sat on the 38th floor, a glass-walled jewel overlooking the city's electric skyline. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished mahogany tables, and a string quartet drifted through clair de lune like a quiet undercurrent. It was the kind of evening meant for champagne toasts and polite applause, except the celebration wasn't mine. I arrived 15 minutes late, my vintage watch marking 8:15 p.m. The deal signing I'd attended earlier had run over, but in my mind, punctuality was still relative when you were invited as an afterthought. To Ethan Carter, however, my timing was an opportunity, a stage cue. He stood at the center table, wineglass in hand, suit perfectly tailored, the glow of triumph in his eyes. Around him, colleagues and friends leaned in, basking in the reflected light of his recent promotion. Ethan's gaze found me the moment I stepped in, and his smile curved into something sharper. "Ah, Victor, you made it. I was starting to think you'd retired from relevance." A ripple of laughter broke out at the table. It was quick, restrained, just enough to sting without becoming openly cruel. I paused, letting my coat slide from my shoulders, meeting his eyes with the steady calm I'd cultivated over years in boardrooms. "Traffic," I said, simply handing my coat to the maitre d'. Ethan raised his glass higher, his voice carrying over the music. "Well, better late than never. Still, it's good to see you, our founding mentor, though I must say the world's moving fast these days. Blink, and it leaves you behind." This time the laughter was louder. A few guests glanced at me with an awkward sympathy, but most returned to their glasses, eager not to break the rhythm of Ethan's dominance. I walked to my seat, feeling the weight of Olivia's eyes from across the table. My daughter's expression was tight lips pressed together, the kind of look that said, "I know this is wrong, but I'm not ready to say anything." Beside her, Lena, my longtime assistant, and one of the few people I trusted, offered the faintest shake of her head, a silent "don't bite." I didn't. I'd learned long ago that public battles rarely favored the one with the truth, they favored the one with the microphone. Ethan had the microphone tonight. I had something better: patience. Dinner proceeded under a thin veneer of civility. Ethan spoke and curated anecdotes about his self-made success, each story conveniently omitting the loans. I'd guaranteed the introductions. I'd arranged the doors. I'd open when no one else would take his calls. He spoke as if history began the day he no longer needed me. Between courses, he leaned back, swirling his wine. "Victor, you've been quiet. Don't you have a story for us? Maybe about the good old days?" The challenge was obvious. I set down my fork, dabbed my mouth with the napkin, and smiled, not the forced politeness I'd worn all night, but something smaller, sharper. "Stories," I said, my tone even. "Oh, I have a few, but some are better saved for the right audience." A faint hush settled over the table. Ethan's smile faltered just enough for me to notice. He took a sip, masking it with a chuckle, but I caught Olivia glancing between us, as if sensing the shape of something she couldn't quite name. I didn't give her or anyone more to go on. I returned to my meal, letting the conversation wash past me. They thought my silence meant surrender. They thought the old man at the end of the table was just that old. But as the plates cleared and the quartet shifted to a darker, slower melody, I caught Ethan's gaze again. This time I let my smile hold a calm that bordered on unsettling. "We'll see," I said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. His brow furrowed ever so slightly. The moment was small, barely noticed by the others, but for me it was the first move on a board only I could see. The next morning, sunlight filtered through my apartment's sheer curtains, painting thin gold lines across the hardwood floor. I stood by the kitchen counter, coffee in hand, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. I wasn't thinking about last night's dinner anymore. I was thinking about the last 2 years and how Ethan Carter had been rewriting history one conversation at a time. It hadn't started with insults. No betrayal rarely announces itself with a trumpet. It begins quietly: missed calls, withheld updates, subtle shifts in tone. 2 years ago, Ethan was still calling me the man who made it possible. A year ago, it became a valuable mentor. 6 months ago, it was a guy I used to work with. Now I was a prop, a relic he could mock to make himself look taller. I sat at my desk scrolling through old emails. Ethan's messages from the early days were eager, deferential, full of gratitude and promise. I'd taken him in when he was nothing but an ambitious junior analyst, green around the edges and drowning in student debt. I gave him a desk in the corner of my office, my client list, and most importantly, my name. My endorsement opened doors he'd never have touched on his own. And in return, I'd expected, not loyalty, exactly. I know better than to expect that in business, but respect, acknowledgement, a sense of honor among thieves. Instead, he'd siphoned away half my clients, convinced two senior partners to pivot without telling me, and built his empire on a foundation I'd laid brick by brick. I pushed the laptop aside. The ache in my chest wasn't from the loss of revenue, it was from the insult, the deliberate erasure. Ethan didn't just want to win, he wanted to pretend I'd never mattered. That's when the folder caught my eye. A thin, leather-bound portfolio on the corner of my desk gathering dust. Inside were copies of agreements, contracts, and transaction records carefully archived over the years. I kept them out of habit the way some people keep photographs. Ethan had signed most of them. His signature was distinctive, a sharp, hurried scrawl with a looping E that slanted forward like it was always trying to outrun itself. The dates, the amounts, the clauses, they told a story far more dangerous than Ethan realized. Deals structured in ways that only worked because my name was on the paperwork. Loans that would have been called in if not for my collateral. Clauses that, if examined closely, might suggest improprieties. My phone buzzed. A message from Lena Morning. Saw the way he treated you last night. You okay? I typed back fine, more than fine. Then I deleted it and wrote, I think I'm ready to move pieces. Her reply came in seconds finally. Lena had been with me long enough to recognize my silences. She knew I never moved without leverage. And now I had more than leverage, I had a library. But I wasn't ready to make a frontal assault. No. People like Ethan thrived on visible conflict. They knew how to win in the spotlight. My advantage was in the shadows. I'd let him keep thinking the board was his while I shifted pieces he didn't even see. Still, one thing gnawed at me, Olivia. My daughter had known Ethan since the beginning. She'd been the one to introduce us back when they were just dating. I couldn't tell how much of his transformation she'd seen or ignored. Her silence last night could have been guilt, or fear, or complicity, and that uncertainty was dangerous. By late afternoon, I'd decided on the first step. I called Lena. Pull the Carter files from the archives, all of them. Make sure we have both hard and digital copies. She didn't ask why. She never does. She just said, give me 2 days. 2 days. Enough time to prepare the second step, testing Olivia's loyalties. I poured another cup of coffee and stared out the window at the city spread below. The skyline was Ethan's now, or so he thought. But cities don't belong to men like him. They belong to the people who know where the foundations are weak. And I knew exactly where to start digging. 2 days later, Lena walked into my office with a slim black briefcase. She didn't need to say a word. The weight of it told me everything. Inside were years of Ethan Carter's career years that were also in many ways my own. She placed it on the desk, locked eyes with me, and said every contract, every side deal, every clause with your name attached. And a few things I found that you didn't even know about. I opened the case and flipped it through the files. A pattern emerged almost immediately: deals funneled through shell companies, inflated valuations, commissions mysteriously redirected into joint accounts Ethan shared with Olivia. I didn't let my expression change, but my pulse ticked faster. If Olivia was receiving those transfers, she wasn't just a bystander. She was in the game. That night I called her. Olivia, let's have dinner. Just us, tomorrow night. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that carries a silent calculation. Sure, Dad. Where I named a quiet place uptown, one of the few restaurants Ethan wouldn't be caught dead in, too understated for his tastes. I wanted no chance of running into his shadow. The next evening, she arrived looking polished but tense. A navy dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. It was a controlled look, calculated. We ordered, made small talk, pretended this was normal. Then as our entrees arrived, I leaned back in my chair. Olivia, I said, keeping my voice even, I've been reviewing some of Ethan's business moves. Some of the deals concerned me, especially the ones where my name was still on the paperwork. She froze for just a fraction of a second before reaching for her wine. I'm sure it's nothing serious. Ethan's just aggressive in business. You've always known that. Aggressive, I repeated softly. Is that what you call redirecting commissions into a shared account? The wine glass stopped midair. She set it down slowly. Dad, I'm not here to accuse, I said, cutting her off. I'm here to give you a chance to tell me where you stand. Because if you're in this with him, I need to know now. Her eyes darted away, then back. You're making it sound like some conspiracy. Ethan's just, I raised a hand. Olivia, I don't want explanations. I want truth. And you have about 5 seconds before I stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. For a moment, the mask slipped. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went cold in a way I'd never seen before. And that was all the answer I needed. When dinner ended, she hugged me, whispered, "You're overthinking this," and left. But I didn't watch her walk away. I was already calling Lena. "She's in," I said flatly. "She's been in for a while. Do you want me to move on her?" "Not yet," I replied. "Ethan's the head. She's a limb. You take the limb too early, and the head gets cautious." I ended the call and looked down at the receipt. The pen I'd signed it with still rested between my fingers. I flipped it over and wrote one name: Harrington. A contact from my early career. A man who'd been burned by Ethan Carter years before Ethan thought he was untouchable. Harrington had resources. Harrington had patience. Most importantly, Harrington had no love for Ethan or for anyone standing beside him. If I was going to dismantle Ethan's empire, I needed allies who didn't care about the cost. Harrington would be my first. The fault lines were showing now, running through both business and blood. And I intended to put pressure on every single one until the whole structure split. Harrington hadn't changed much in 20 years. Same sharp suit, same expression that made you wonder if he was sizing you up or calculating your price. His office overlooked the river, all glass and cold steel, a perfect reflection of the man himself. He stood as I entered, offering a handshake that was firm without being friendly. "Victor Hale. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? I think you already know," I said, taking a seat. "Ethan Carter." A slow grin spread across his face. "Haven't heard that name in a while. Last time I did, he'd just stolen a deal out from under me. Nearly cost me my company." "Nearly," I repeated. "But not quite, which means you know how to survive him. I need that knowledge in your reach." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "And why now? You've been in his orbit for years." "Because now," I said evenly, "he's using my name to run side deals. Deals that could put me in prison if they implode. And I've confirmed my daughter is complicit." Harrington studied me for a long moment. "Family betrayal. Nasty business." "I'm past the hurt," I replied. "Now it's just math. Remove the leverage, then the man." I laid out what Lena and I had uncovered: shell companies, false invoices, the commission diversions. Harrington listened without interrupting, but I could see the shift in his posture from detached interest to engaged predator. When I finished, he said, "You've got enough here to rattle him, but not sink him. Yet." "I'm aware," I said. "That's why I'm here. I need help building the rest of the case. I want him cornered before he even suspects a fight is coming." Harrington smiled thinly. "You want a silent siege." "Exactly." He walked to a locked cabinet and pulled out a file thicker than my briefcase. "Ethan's enemies don't talk to each other. Too much pride, too many grudges. But I've kept track of them." He tossed the file on the desk between us. "Some of them would kill for a chance to bleed him. You just have to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When the moment comes, you let me be in the room when it all comes down." I met his gaze. "You'll have a front row seat." By the time I left his office, we had a plan. Harrington would quietly reach out to 3 other parties Ethan had crossed, each with a piece of the puzzle I didn't yet have. In exchange, I'd feed him every internal detail Lena and I uncovered, ensuring we could coordinate the timing of every move. That night, I briefed Lena over the phone. She didn't sound surprised. "I figured you'd bring Harrington in. He plays long games just like you." "Good," I said, "because the first stone's been laid. Now we see how far the ripples go." 3 days later, the first ripple came back. Harrington called me, voice low but edged with satisfaction. "One of my contacts has proof Ethan doctored a valuation report for a real estate acquisition last year. Inflated it by 20% to justify siphoning investor funds." "That's fraud," I said flatly, "and traceable. His name is on the digital trail. We get enough of these, Victor, and he won't just lose his position, he'll lose his freedom." I hung up and sat in the dark for a while, staring at the city lights. The pieces were starting to move, and Ethan didn't even know the board had changed. But I also knew this was the stage where arrogance made people sloppy, and I couldn't afford sloppiness. not when my own daughter might still be feeding him information. So I decided the next move would be to test her again. Push her just enough to see if my words ended up back in Ethan's ear. If they did, I'd know exactly how deep I'd have to cut Dot. The cafe was half empty, the kind of place where conversations dissolved into the hum of the espresso machine. Olivia slid into the booth across from me, her designer coat still damp from the rain. She didn't meet my eyes. "You wanted to talk," she said. I did. I took a measured sip of my coffee. I've been thinking about letting Ethan handle the Petrovia contract. It's messy, but he claims he can fix it. Her head snapped up. Petrovia, that's a dead-end deal. Half those companies are blacklisted in the EU. I shrugged. He swears he can push it through, says it could bring in 8 figures if we move fast. She frowned, but I caught the flicker quick sharp before she masked it. If you trust him, I suppose. I didn't say I trusted him, I said. But the board's restless. They want results, not lectures on ethics. If this works, we both benefit. If not, I let the silence do the work. The Petrovia contract was a fiction, my fiction. Every detail I fed her had been carefully crafted, a hint of legal risk, a promise of profit, and a timeline tight enough to demand immediate action. If she passed it to Ethan, I'd know within 48 hours. Harrington's tech team had embedded a digital watermark in the proposal file. The moment it left her device, we'd see it. That night, Lena called. "You think she'll take the bait she already has," I said. She couldn't hide the tells. "You sure you're ready for the answer?" "Doesn't matter," I replied. "Truth doesn't need my permission." 42 hours later, Harrington's number flashed on my phone. "It's out," he said without preamble. "File hit Ethan's private server last night. He's already scheduled a meeting with an intermediary in Zurich." I felt a cold clarity settle over me. Good. Now we make sure that intermediary is expecting someone else. We move fast. Harrington's contacts in Zurich, people who owed him favors from the kind of deals that never make headlines, were happy to help. By the time Ethan's plane touched down, his intermediary had been replaced with a compliance officer posing as a buyer. Every word, every promise he made would be recorded. I didn't tell Olivia. Not yet. I wanted her to have just enough rope to see what she'd done. The Zurich meeting went exactly as planned. Ethan pitched the contract like it was a gold mine, skimming over the sanctions, exaggerating potential returns. The compliance officer played along, asking all the right questions, letting him dig the hole deeper. By the end of the hour, Ethan had committed 3 separate felonies on record, in the file that started it all, still carrying the invisible signature that traced it back to Olivia's tablet. When I finally called her, my voice was calm. "We need to talk. Tonight." She hesitated. "I'm busy, make time," I said. We met in my office after dark, the city glowing in the windows behind her. I slid a printed transcript across the desk. She scanned the first page, then the second. Her hand trembled before she set it down. "You set me up." "No," I said evenly. "You set yourself up. All I did was give you a choice." Her eyes filled, but there was no apology in them, only anger. "You have no idea what he's done for me." "I know exactly what he's done," I replied. "And now the board will too." When she left, I sat alone for a long time. I wasn't sure if I felt vindicated or hollow. Maybe both. Harrington called just before midnight. Ethan's scrambling. Word's gotten back to him that Zurich isn't going the way he thought. He's calling lawyers. "Good," I said. "Let him sweat. By the time we're done, he won't know which fire to put out first." The trap was set, and now it wasn't just about a survival. It was about making sure Ethan never got close enough to strike again. I knew the final move was coming, and when it landed, it would erase the last shadow he'd cast over my life. 30 days later, the boardroom smelled of polished oak and expensive caution. We were on the 42nd floor, glass walls, giving a clear view of the winter skyline, cold lights spilling over a city that never paused. The table was long, glossy, and already set like a stage. Harrington sat 2 chairs down from me, leafing through a briefing packet as if it were the morning paper. Lena was beside me, laptop open, fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, eyes sharp. Across the table, the company's general counsel, 2 independent directors, and the head of compliance sat waiting. At the far end, one empty chair, Ethan's. He arrived late, naturally, his swagger rehearsed. He dropped into the chair like a man claiming territory, flashing the room a smile that used to be currency. "Let's make this quick," he said. "Zurich was a misunderstanding. My team is handling it." General counsel didn't return the smile. Then you'll appreciate the opportunity to clarify. I stayed quiet. Not my turn. I'd spent weeks setting the stage. This scene belonged to others. Compliance went first. Her voice was steady, stripped of emotion. Item 1, last year's acquisition valuation overstated by 20%. Our outside reviewer, she nodded to Harrington, found the source edits traceable to your login credentials. The changes materially impacted investor disclosures. Ethan leaned forward. Creative modeling isn't fraud. Creative modeling, she replied, doesn't mean overwriting independent appraisals and re-exporting them under the original analyst's name. A muscle twitched in his jaw. If we're here to nitpick, we're here an independent director cut in because our duty is to shareholders, not to egos. Compliance slid a second packet across the table. Item 2, the Zurich meeting. The intermediary was a compliance asset. We have both transcript and audio. A click. Ethan's voice filled the room, confident and careless, explaining how to skirt sanctions, dismissing EU restrictions as guidelines, bragging about quiet channels and fast lanes. Ethan tried to wave it off. Out of context. Context counsel leaned in. You described concealing provenance, offered inducements, and claimed the pipeline was clean while referencing flagged counterparties. Finally, Ethan turned his gaze on me. Victor fed you this. He's been sabotaging deals. Lena spoke, for the first time her tone surgical. What Victor fed was a decoy file with a digital watermark. It originated from Olivia Carter's tablet, hit your private server at 2:16 a.m., and was forwarded to Zurich by your EA at 7:03. The chain of custody is intact. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to tilt the room. I opened my folder, laying out 4 documents in a precise row, 2016 wire receipts. My funds, his name on the receiving end. A personal guarantee signed by me, notarized by a bank officer. An email from Ethan. Couldn't have done this without you, Victor, complete with intact headers. A transcript excerpt, his taunt from the dinner. How does it feel to be irrelevant? I met his eyes. You were wrong. General counsel barely glanced at the evidence. It wasn't about relitigating debt. It was about motive history and a pattern the board could no longer ignore. Mr. Carter, she said, the board will accept your resignation effective immediately. Decline and will suspend you for cause pending a vote and refer Zurich and the valuation matter to regulators. Ethan looked around for allies, found none. You think you'll come out clean? You all used me. Perhaps the independent director said evenly, but only one of us falsified records. He turned back to me. You did this. No, I said. You did. I just turned on the lights. The pen in his hand trembled. Then he signed. They always do when they understand the alternative. The meeting dissolved into shuffling papers and muttered instructions, clawbacks, disclosure plans, regulatory coordination. Harrington closed his packet with the satisfaction of a man who had just collected a long overdue debt. In the hallway, he clapped my shoulder. Neat work. Just work, I said. You're allowed to enjoy it. He grinned. Enjoyment wasn't the point. Clean lines were. Lena and I rode down in silence. At the lobby, she asked, Want to call Olivia? Not yet. She'll call you. I know. Outside, the cold hit like honesty. I walked to the Riverside Park, sat on a bench, and watched a tugboat shove a barge through steel gray water. My phone buzzed, the Ledger's investigative desk, restraint noted. Off-record, impressive work. By afternoon, the official release hit the wire. No fireworks, no adjectives. Just corporate code resignation, irregularities, full cooperation. An hour later, a message from an old contact, need a strategist who knows when to stay quiet. Coffee, I type back tomorrow. Early. That evening, Olivia called. No tears, no denial. Just, you could have warned me. I did. Twice. She hesitated. What happens to him? What always happens? There's a process. He'll learn more from it than applause. And us, that depends. If you sign the ethics attestation tomorrow, you start walking back toward yourself. If not, you stay where you are. I'll sign, she said. Good. The next morning, coffee with Daniel Brooks. No speeches, just logistics, risk culture. He was buying my timing, not my trophies. We shook hands, alignment, not triumph. On my way out, I passed a newsstand. Ethan's name was buried below the fold, reduced to 3 sentences. That's what real endings look like, quiet, documented, irreversible. A thin winter sun caught the glass of a tower, a seam of light along a hard edge. I thought of his question. How does it feel to be irrelevant? It feels like a misread position. I was never the piece. I was the board. I stepped into the crosswalk, the city carrying on without ceremony. Justice isn't loud, it's load-bearing. In the quiet after the storm, I could finally hear my own thoughts again. What they meant for humiliation became the spark that reignited my purpose. Justice doesn't always roar. It can arrive in the steady steps of a man who refuses to stay down. I walked away knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or messy. It's living on your own terms with your head held high.